What's up, guys, and welcome back to another dive into C Nodes. So, in this tutorial, I want to actually go back in time a little bit to my barrel tutorial. When I was going through this breakdown, we sort of glossed over this pattern selection node, and I didn't really go into detail into this node because it was a little bit too big of a leap forward for what I was trying to show in that video. So this was my little cheat within that video because I said I used pretty much only the basic nodes except this one. But now we're pretty much at the point where I think it's a good idea to go over this node, and this was brought to my attention. Shout out to Matthew, where he said, "Great tutorial. My only complaint would be that we don't know how you made the pattern selection node, and that is used to create the rim rings." It'd be nice to dive into that and share it with us, or share it with us as well. So, shout outs to Matthew. This is for you and everybody else. So, in order to, the reason that now is a good time to go into this is because based on what we've learned in the previous tutorials, we're sort of in a natural transition to start to talk about a couple of new nodes. And those nodes are the range node and the loop carried value node. I'm also going to do a quick little, just talk a little bit about the memory node in this one too, because the loop carried value node and the memory node are very similar. So we'll get a little preview into the memory node. This tutorial is probably going to be the last in this sort of like getting started, start here series for seed nodes. I'm still going to do seed nodes content, but I think makes a good end for like just the going from zero to being able to kind of know your way around and kind of have a decent idea of what's going on. Um, I think I'm also all the little nodes and helpers that I've made. I'm thinking I'm just going to go ahead and pack those up and just share out all that stuff. I've been a little bit hesitant to do that, not because I was trying to be like stingy about it or whatever, but honestly, like a lot of these nodes, they're kind of they're kind of hacky, honestly. And so I was thinking like, oh, maybe I'll share it once things are a little bit cleaner, a little bit maybe more optimized. Um, but I mean, whatever. I think I'm just gonna share them in the state they're in with a disclaimer of like, I wouldn't, I'd be careful. Maybe think about these as just like a learning resource. I wouldn't be like working on some big, important project and make any of the nodes that I share like some very integral part of that. Or at the very least, just open them up so that you understand what's going on, so that you can understand the limitations of what you can and can't do with those nodes. So I'll probably be making that available in the near future, so you can have this pattern selection node and a few other nodes. I'll also make a video going through like all the different nodes that I made and what they all do. So before we can really jump into this node, at the end we'll go through and do a full breakdown of this node. But first, let's talk about the range and loop carried value nodes. And so first, we're just going to come back to here where before I was talking about arrays and how those work. And, previously we spoke about the iterate collection node, and we said that the way that this node works is each element in the array, this is just a visualization, like each element is sort of like a bucket, and then that bucket has something in it, and that's some sort of data. And an iterate collection says go through every single element in this array, grab everything in all these buckets, and then do something to them. I also mentioned that when I was talking about this, that you can use an iterate collection to do something to every single element. You can use a get element to say, hey, grab element number 5 and do something to that. But what I also said is that you can grab a range of elements. So you could say, grab elements 3 through 9 and do something to those. But I didn't really talk about how do you do that. How do you grab a range of elements? And the way that you do that is with the aptly named range node. So let's make something, a simplest sort of example I can think of. And if we just make a cube and we are, let's do a loop carried value and a range. And so let's, I guess first off, let's use a range in the way that I just mentioned. So if we, let's actually make a plane to start off with. And let's see, what do we got here? Okay, so we've got some points. Maybe we can leave it at 20. And I'm going to do a geometry property get. And so now the property that we're getting is the positions. So now this is an array with all the point positions on here. So if I were going to say do a get element, here, and right now it's going to get element 0. So what's going to happen, what this is outputting is a position for the 0 element. So like if we just say, let's make a sphere and do a transform geometry on this sphere, and we're going to plug this value into here, and let's put that in output, and that sphere is really huge, so let's put it like to 2. And just so that we can see the plane and our sphere at the same time, let's make a connect object, put both of these in here, and then put that here. So you can see that's element 0, and as we change this, we're getting all these different elements. So instead, and you see if we go negative, since cycle indexes is checked, then it just starts from the opposite direction. Okay, so now we're getting element whatever this is. But if we, instead of just typing in the element here, we plug in this range, you can see it's saying 0 to 0, but now if we say 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way however many we want, so we can say all the way up until here, but then we can change the start also, and you can see that we're selecting a range of elements based on this start and end. So that's one way to use the range node. It's basically to target a range of elements. But another way that you can use it is the loop carried is within the loop carried value node. And so this way of using it is actually not how I'm using it in my pattern selection node. It's this other way, but I just wanted to show you that just to kind of give you an idea of what this is doing. But essentially, in the way that this is described in the documentation, is that the range node is sort of like a for loop. And what that is basically saying is for every element within this range, do the thing, whatever the thing is that we're going to do. If you remember, as I said, with the iterate collection, it's for every single element within this, within this array, do the thing. The range node is saying for every element within this range, do the thing. Okay, so here we're getting a position, and so that's the thing that we're doing, and we're doing it for every element within this range. Okay, so that's how that works. But also what we can do, so we can, just going to delete all that. And so we've got this loop carried value node. It's going to take our cube again, bring this out. So simplest way for me to sort of explain this is that the loop carried value node is a node where whatever you do within this node is like a group, and so you can go inside of it, and whatever happens in here, it's going to loop over what's happening in here over and over and over again. And how many times you loop through whatever is going on in here, that's defined by this range node. So let's put this back to 0, 0, and let's say maybe like 0, 1, and we'll just keep this very simple. And you can do this with all sorts of data. So you have to define the data type of the loop carried value node. So we're going to say this is geometry. So we're going to input our cube, go in here, and I'm just going to say transform geometry, plug that in here, and let's just move it up, like, let's say 100, and output that, and then put that here. So you can see the cube just moved up 100 units. So if we go into the range node, let's put this actually back to 0, and we're going to take this outer scope thingy and plug that in to here, and you see the cube went back down. So now we can say do it once. So in this context, the range node, because basically what this is it's like a manual iterator instead of the iterate collection, which kind of automatically iterates through however many elements are in an array. The range node is letting you define like how many loops, how many iterations. So this is doing it once, twice, 3 times, however many times. So all we're doing is, so now this has moved up 600 units because in here we said go up 100 units, and we're running that loop 6 times. So this is where I said, since we're talking about this, we might as well go ahead and show the memory node, which works very similarly, except instead of the loops being defined by this range node, the loops are defined by time. So for every frame, whatever's in here is going to get run. So if we put this into here, and let's just be lazy and copy that and paste it, put that here and put that in there, and then we take this next and put that there, and then we just press play, that cube is going to shoot off into the heavens. Okay, so that's how that works. Let's go back to this one, and let's bring this just to 1. But let's do something else just to reiterate this. So let's do a inset, and then do an extrude. And for the inset, let's maybe set this to 10%, and the extrude, let's maybe say 2. And before we do that, let's come out here, and let's say select all. And previous tutorials we kind of learned, I think it was maybe the first one where we learned about why it's important to make that initial selection. So I'm not gonna go into an explanation on that, but you can see we did an inset and then we did an extrude, and we're doing it 1 time. If we do it more, you can see what's happening. We get something like that. And so within here, we can go in and we can make adjustments. We could say, okay, maybe we want that extrude to be a little bit more. And it's still going to update and do that however many times we specified. Again, just for the record, we can take this, copy it, go into our memory node, just so things don't get crazy. This is about 45 or something, so let's just lower that to 45 and put this in here and put this in here, and we'll get something like that. Okay, so that's a very basic introduction as to what the loop carried value, memory, and range node do. These are really powerful nodes. This is by no means like a comprehensive sort of explanation, but just so that the breakdown of the pattern selection node makes sense, get like a little introduction. It's loop carried value is going to take something that you're doing and do it over and over again, defined by the range node in terms of how many times you do it. Memory works similarly, except it is defined by time. But in both cases, whatever you have going on in here, it's just going to loop through that over and over and over again. Okay, so let's talk about the pattern selection now. And so this is just a utility node that I made because I found myself sort of wanting to select every other loop in a few situations. And I just wanted to automate that process because I did it enough times to where I just wanted to make a node that just did it automatically. And that's basically what this node is. So I'm just going to make a copy, and maybe let's break down actually the logic of how it works first. So let's make a nodes mesh. And I'm just gonna move this over here, give it some segments. So this node, in order for it to work similarly to how it worked in this example, where we got this kind of like perfect every other loop selection, it needs to have an odd number of faces in the direction that you want the pattern to grow. And you would select the middle one. This is if you want like some perfect every other loop thing. It can work on any selection, but if that's how you want it to work, then that's what you would need. So the way that it basically works is there's two different modes. So I'm going to do a bounding box selection. So one way is just through a bounding box, and this way works well if what you're trying to make the selection on is an object like this, where it's just standing up right in the sort of like X, Y, Z coordinate space, or in its own coordinate space, and you just the middle edge that you're looking for is actually in the middle of the object. This is just there's like a simplified sort of like workflow. The other thing that you can do is you can just manually define the selection that you want to grow out from, and this cube is an example of that. So I just manually picked this cube right here, this face right here, and then we just grow out from that selection. So, but again, let's just talk about what's actually happening. So we do a selection, bounding box. Let's do oops, wrong button, 2 times in a row. Visualize selection. And so this is a custom node that's on my Gumroad. So if you don't have this one, just head over there and get it for free. And if we now look at this, you can see what we've got. And we basically want to get this down to just the middle selection. So let's increase that. And we can increase this a little bit just to keep that. So something around there. And the way that, just very quickly, the way that that node works is it's basically starting out with a box around your object, and as you're shortening, this is getting closer to 50%. It's like the top's going down, the bottom's going up. Okay, because this is like I forget whether the top or the bottom is 100% or 0%, but one of them is 100%, one of them is 0%. So as you get closer to 50%, it's like you're taking this box and you're squishing it to be around just the middle part. Okay, so now we've just got that middle edge selected. So then what we do is we are going to store that selection, and we'll just call this init. That's the initial selection. Okay, so now we've got init stored. Then we're going to grow the selection. And so you see that now we've got all three of these faces selected. And then we're going to subtract the initial selection. So I'm going to say select, and we're going to do active minus quotations init. And so we've got that. So this process, that's the loop. So we're basically going to build a setup where we loop through that process over and over and over again. But that's essentially what's happening. Okay, so that's the sort of context. So let's jump in to one of these and jump into the node. Maybe it'll be better to do it on the one that's actually working. So let's go in here and we're going to say asset, edit asset as group. So you can see that there's two inputs for geometry. And the first one is if you just want to use, because that first step, again, is going to be the select bounding box. So the settings for that are just exposed here. So you can define that initial selection with this. Or if you wanted to manually select the middle face, you just switch the mode here to manual, and then you just input a selection of a face. And so you would do, say, like a select node here, or a select an edge loop, or whatever. Any kind of selection you'd want, you'd just take that and then you'd put that in here. And that's a way to sort of start things off. And then we also have loops, and that's defined here. This, if you followed along, you might know that this is basically exposing from the range node to define how many loops, how many iterations we're going to do with this. So let's jump in and simplify a little bit. So what we've got going here, the exact same thing is happening in here twice, and we're just switching between whether you are using the select bounding box to define your initial selection, or manual selection to define your initial selection. But it's just the same thing. So we're doing it with the select bounding box. So let's just start from here. So again, we've got this range node, and that's exposed here. I think the number of loops set is 17. And we are using a print node, and that print is just printing init, right? So that's the initial, well, actually, let me just explain that. What we're basically going to do is we're going to build a procedural selection string, just a text string. If you saw in that example, I said active minus init. So we're going to build it to where that text is dynamic and it changes based on the parameters. So we're going to build a custom string that changes based on like the range amount here. So we start with that first init, and then we, in a previous tutorial, we used a different concatenate node, but this is just a concatenate for strings. And so here you can see, if we look at this, it's init 17. So again, the concatenate node, if you don't remember, didn't see that tutorial, it's just going to sequence things. So the count coming out of the range node is how many loops. So again, this is set to 17. So we have init, and then that init gets added to that count. So it is now init 17. Then that goes into a prefix suffix. So this allows us again to modify a string by adding something before it and adding something after it. So what we add before and after is the quotations. So that basically makes that custom selection string, and the quotations around it are necessary for it to be called in a selection. So we just added that. And then we add another prefix suffix here. And this is adding before that active minus. So that's the prefix. This is going before. So now we've created the full custom selection string. So it's active minus init 17. So then in the loop carried value node, we've got the geometry coming in, and then we're defining how many loops with this range from this opening scope to this closing scope. And then we're also bringing in this information. So we've got the initial name, which is init 17. So that's getting brought in. And then the full selection string, which is active minus quotations init 17. So let's see what we do in that. So this is basically the exact same setup that I just showed you a second ago, where the first thing we do is we take that initial name, the init 17, and we store that selection. So init 17 is stored now. We grow the selection, and then in here, we basically do another select node, which is the full selection string, which is active minus init 17. And then that's what gets output. And this is just a switch to, this is based on whether you pick the manual or just the select bounding box. Okay, so that's basically it. You're building a custom selection string, and you're running through that loop of selecting making a selection, growing from that selection, and then subtracting the initial selection. And we're just doing that over and over again. So the end result is, if we grab our cylinder and look at it, grab this, if we bring this down, you can see, so this is what you get if you, and this is why I kind of need to mess with these settings. Since the faces are very close to each other, I need to adjust the selection min and max so that I can get just the first, because right now basically what I'm doing is I'm selecting multiple faces in that initial select bounding box. So that's something you need to be aware of, and know that the way to fix that is to come in here and tweak these settings. So this needs to be lower, and this one needs to be higher. And once you get it to where it should be just two faces with a single iteration, and once you've got that, then you can just go in and it will just grow from that and select every other face loop. This square example is same thing, but instead of starting with the select bounding box, you can see this one is set to manual. And in here, I just grabbed the middle polygon, so that when we do it once, you can see we just get the selection grew out once, and then we subtracted the initial selection. And then you just keep doing that over and over again. And you get something like this. So depending on where you start the selection and what the selection looks like, you can get, I mean, this is how I've actually used it and stuff, but you can get like a lot of different patterns selected, because you obviously you don't need to just select a single face. You could have multiple faces selected. You could go in and just select like this, from this face to this face and this face to this face, and have that be a single selection, and then grow a selection from there. So that's why it's just called pattern selection, because depending on the initial input selection, it'll just grow the selection and select every other, obviously it works with, no, I think this one, I built this one to only work with faces. But yeah, so it'll just grow out from there and, select this pattern. Okay, so then the quick review of how this was used in the barrel is that we took that, and basically I started from the middle. If we look at these, it's kind of hard to see, but basically, because everything has been like subdivided and stuff like that, so maybe let's just take this out and take, where's the subdivide? Out. Yeah, I might just explain it. You guys get it. But yeah, so we've got that middle edge. We grew all the way out there, and so we've got every other face loop selected. In this case, I've modified it a little bit so that it's two faces. There's a way to do that. But I'm just kind of giving you the basics of it. I won't go into like the super granular sort of details. But yeah, we selected every other, we selected this pattern, and then we did another select bounding box where we did a select facing actually, and sort of like started from the top and the bottom, and then grew, and then we intersected those selections using the ampersand. So you can see we got rails ampersand active. So using the intersection of those two selections, that's how we defined this rail selection. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I'll make, when I make all these nodes available, I'll just make a quick video just going through all the different nodes that I've made and what they do. Where I talk about a little bit about their limitations. That'll be coming soon. I might even, if I have time, I might just get to that today. But yeah, that's the basic idea. So this node will be available, but obviously, hopefully, you could probably just watch this and figure it out, how to just build it yourself. But I will just have it, if you just don't even want to do that, you just want to download it, it'll be available soon. This is another node I made. This will be available too. This is selection offset. And basically what this does is it offsets that selection. So, doesn't really look like much with this selection, but depending on what the selection is, like if we grab this one again, and we come into here, it's this guy, and we did a selection offset. The way that this works, though, is that you need to make a select node, and expose the selection string, and then this goes into there. This goes into there, and this would go into there. And then we could offset this selection like that. So this is another little handy node. Anyway, that was a sidetrack. So yeah, I think that's it for this tutorial. Hope you guys enjoyed and learned something, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.